to you, I just wanted to kind of update them that Dr. Harjinder Singh Lallie is a much loved teacher in University of Warwick and a wonderful researcher as well. And in addition to that, a little secret that he keeps not so well is the fact that he is also a wonderful musician. So if you're interested in listening to Rag Kirtan, he's a great teacher of Rag Kirtan in the United Kingdom too. But here, of course, we are focused more on his work in cybersecurity, and specifically, he's picking up on Dashcam Forensics today, which is an interesting space that I know very little about. So I'm hoping to learn a lot from you during this webinar, and I'm sure the students will too. So over to you, and thank you again for taking out the time to talk to us here.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have around 31 slides, and you can ask questions by simply just putting your hand up. I normally use Microsoft Teams, and in Teams, there's a feature to put your hands up and then you ask a question. You can also put your question into the chat. So I am just getting the chat in front of me so that I can see it here. Yes, I've now got the chat box in front of me. So I'll be able to see that as well. So ask questions in whatever form suits you. My talk today is going to be about dashcam forensics. It's an area that I specialize in. My kind of general kind of specialism is in cybersecurity and digital forensics, and within that, there are two particular areas that I spend more time in. One is in kind of threat modeling and understanding kind of complex attacks. And I've published a number of papers in that area. And the other is in dashcam forensics. And I have one paper published, which I'll point you to. And I've got maybe three that I believe I will publish by the end of the year. So there's a lot of research that we're doing in this space. My email address is there, and I am on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I have a profile on ratemyprofessors.com. You're welcome to have a look at that, and I'm quite happy to receive emails after this talk. So if you have any questions about my research, I am happy to take those questions. I can't help you about queries such as, there's a lot of things obviously I won't be able to help you with, but anything to do with my research, I'll be able to help you with. So this is the paper that we published last year, preliminary analysis of 7 dashcam devices. It is the first paper that we know of on dashcam forensics. And even after that paper has been published, there is nothing more that has come into this space. So I'm in a good area. And that's always a wonderful thing in research when you discover a niche and you can focus on that area. Just to, before I kind of go forward, let me just tell you what a dash cam is. So there's 3 dash cams there. And a dash cam basically is a camera that you stick onto the windshield of your car. It records the journey. It records the audio in the car. It records the video, and the more complex dash cams today also have a cabin view recording, so it's actually recording the passengers, and they now also have an additional camera that you put onto the back of the car, and it records the scene behind the car as well. They record coordinates, they record your route, your speed. There's a lot of data that these devices are recording. As we move forward, you may have heard about the concept of autonomous vehicles. These are cars and vehicles that will self-guide themselves to where you want them to go. The driver does not need to be operating the steering. You just give them coordinates and the car takes you there. So we're moving into this domain space of intelligent vehicles, autonomous vehicles, where the driver has very little to do with the vehicle itself. Within the same space, we now also have autonomous drones. So my research is very closely related to drone forensics. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, we've entered into discussions with the local police force, West Midlands Police Force, because we're going to do some joint research with them. Drones are a wonderful kind of technology, but they're also causing huge issues and problems here in the UK. So drones are those cameras that can go into the air. They fly like a helicopter. They're a tiny device. You've seen them at weddings maybe. And what's happening is a number of things. Number one, drones are being used to drop knives, drugs, phones into prisons. Drones have been used to stop flights. And there's a lot more that drones are being used for, which is also causing a lot of concern. So my research is closely linked to that as well. So with intelligent vehicles and autonomous drones, this kind of technology is obviously going to be built into those devices. So getting into this space right now is really good, because it means we're kind of future-proofing ourselves. We're kind of looking ahead to how we can investigate these devices when there's an incident. So that's the link to my paper. Please download it, have a read. If you can't download it, let me know. I'm quite happy to send it to you. So a lot of my data is UK based. I'm not sure what the proliferation of dash cams is like in India right now. I don't know how popular they are. Maybe some of you can maybe put in the chat whether you're using one, whether your car has one, whether your parents' car has one. I don't think these are that popular in India just yet. But in the UK, just between 2015 and 2018, we've seen almost a threefold increase in the use of dash cams, and we're expecting it to grow very rapidly. In 2017, that is 4 years ago, we put in what's known as a Freedom of Information request, which is a request that you put into public bodies to get information from them. And by law, they have to respond. And so this Freedom of Information request to Nottingham Police revealed that there were 211,598 dashcam records over a 3-year period leading up to 2017. So the kind of dashcam, any case that featured a dashcam or even recorded that there was a dashcam present in a car, there were almost, just over 200,000, 2 lakhs of records that featured dashcams. So there's a question that's just come onto the chat, and that is, well, what do people use these dashcams for? Well, when people install these into their car, the reason they're doing it is to protect against accidents. So if there's an accident and, for example, the car in front of you brakes very hard and you go into the back of that car, you want it caught on the camera so that you can use it as evidence in an insurance case. That is the main reason why dash cams are being used, because people just want a record of the journey. Now, just as we do with photos, what you have in photos is people are now, people are taking, they've taken tens of thousands of photos and they Google map them because they go on holiday, they visit different places, and the photos are gathering EXIF data. They're gathering metadata of the location you've been to. You know, so people, rather than recording on each photo where it was taken, they're plotting them on Google Maps, and it's automatically telling them this is where you took that photo. So they're kind of building up these maps of where they've been around the world. People are now also doing that with dash cams. They're kind of, you know, keeping footage of their travels. So there's a lot, for instance, it's popular to do a east-west tour in the USA. And it's also becoming popular now for people to take a dash cam of the entire journey and save it, because they're only going to do that journey once in their whole life. And they want to keep a record of the whole journey in the car, all the conversations they had, the music they were listening to, the road, the cabin view of the passengers. You know, it's become a bit of a kind of a hobby for some people. So there's many kind of use cases of dash cams. But as far as the police are concerned, the dash cam also records, like I said, the cabin conversation and the kind of the road ahead. And I'll show you some examples of case studies where dash cams have been used as evidence in the UK. So in the UK now, the police authorities recognize that dash cams contain very useful evidence. This table here on the right was correct as of April 2020. I haven't gone back and updated it. At the time, this has got a list. Basically, this is all the UK police authorities. And what this table shows is 1, 2 kind of mechanisms for uploading dashcam evidence. So if I, as a citizen, witness an accident and I want to upload the evidence relating to that accident, depending on where the accident happened, I have 2 options. If the accident happened in Warwickshire, which, for example, is where the University of Warwick is based, then I would go to the next base site, and they have an online portal through which I can now upload that evidence, that footage that I captured, where I am a witness and I've seen an accident or I've seen an incident on the road. I can just upload it there. Same with West Midlands, which is where I live. Again, I can just go to the next base site, and there's a whole list here where if the incident took place in Avon and Somerset, you would go to the Avon and Somerset police website and you'd upload it there. So at the moment, number one, there isn't a single universal portal in the UK to upload the evidence. And number two, not all police authorities are accepting dashcam evidence. They're only accepting it, you know, if they kind of they ask for it themselves. They're not inviting you to upload it yourself. That said, April last year, there were a lot of police constabularies on the list who were intending to make a portal available. Okay, maybe by now a lot of them have, and there were only a small number that hadn't announced their intention last year. I suppose the point from this slide is, number one, dashcam usage is growing. It may not be very popular in India right now, but after you've heard this lecture, I think you're going to consciously begin noticing a lot more people who've got them. They already had them, you probably never noticed, and now you're going to be noticing it a lot more. Number two, it's going to grow. You're going to see dash cams becoming very affordable. It's going to become a fashion item, I think. People are just going to want one because it's just a nice thing to have, maybe, I don't know. And number 3, that in India, although police authorities may not currently be accepting dashcam evidence, i.e. a citizen witnesses an incident, they want to upload the evidence somewhere to report the incident. Within 5 years, maybe, you will see that the police have set up systems to accept that evidence. So I think this talk is probably 2 years ahead of what you're going to see in the next few years. But that's a good thing. That's always a good thing in research. My institution, for example, we're always trying to discover research topics that are 2 years ahead. We haven't really, kind of hit the big problem yet, and we're trying to solve it well in advance. So if you're looking for research ideas, for project ideas, this is a really good place to get into, because you will have got into this well before it becomes a big issue in India. And I'm quite happy to help you, okay? Let's move on. What I have here is, it's a fraction of a data set that I have, which outlines a series of court cases which have involved dash cams as evidence. I'm not going to read all this out, but what I do want to say is we've got a lot of evidence of cases where people are third parties, i.e. they were not involved in the incident. They were just witnesses. Maybe they were standing at crossroads and an accident happened in front of them, and they then provided their dash cam as evidence. Maybe they were themselves in the incident, obviously. But then we have, there's a good case here, bear with me. There, this one here, Patrick Collins. What we have here is Patrick Collins' dash cam captures Patrick Collins knocking over and killing someone. And then there's audio evidence where Patrick Collins has admitted the accident. So what we're also getting now are examples, and I have plenty of these as well, where drug dealers, for example, have a dash cam in their car, and these drug dealers are going to a venue to drop off some drugs and pick up some money. And the dash cam captures all the phone calls, confirmation that they've picked up the money. It's all in the dash cam. The whole conversation is in there. So now we're suddenly finding that these devices, they can be so valuable, for law enforcement. But the problem is that there are no, number one, tools, and number two, guidelines on how to investigate these devices. And because there are no tools or guidelines, we render the risk of miscarriage. What I mean by that is that we have a real kind of case where, because the police didn't know how to analyze this evidence, analyze the dash cam, there were no guidelines in terms of what to do when you arrive at a suspect's car and there's a dash cam in that car. What should we do? How do we handle that evidence? And you might think that is a very menial, it's a very, a trivial task, but it isn't, because a dash cam is one of those very, very few devices where you can actually compromise the evidence just by touching it. And what I mean by that is dash cams have a feature, it's the park feature, which basically, the dash cam has a device called a G sensor, which activates when the dash cam is moved. When it senses a shock, it turns on and it starts recording. And if you are a law enforcement officer, you arrive at a car, the car has a dash cam in there, and you remove the dash cam, you've immediately turned it on and it started to record. And the way dash cam recordings work is they start overwriting the oldest recording. So now you've suddenly made it start overwriting an old recording, which could be the one recording you wanted. So my point being that because there are no guidelines, don't actually know how they should be handling this device. So let's move forward. I'm going to give you a case study, okay? And let's ask ourselves a few questions. And this is a very extreme example of why we need the technology and the guidelines to investigate a dashcam device, okay? So let's just work through this. The scenario is as follows. Sirius Slack is the subject of multiple court orders. Court order A prevents him from entry within a 1.5 mile radius of his ex-wife's home. It also prevents him from entering a 1.5 mile radius of his ex-wife's workplace. And we know where she works, okay? I've just given it as a postcode because I don't want to give addresses in this talk. But this is where she works, and we know the hours she works. And we know now that there's a court order in place which stops him from entering a 1.5 mile radius of either her home or her workplace. He's not allowed to do that. If he does, he's contravening the court order and can be arrested and can be charged and could potentially be imprisoned. Sirius Slack is also under a restraining order which puts a curfew on his travel. What that means is that he is not allowed to travel outside certain hours. You know, he can only travel between 9 in the morning and 5 p.m. If he travels outside of any of those times, then he could be again, he could face prosecution. And finally, this individual also has a court order which requires him to have a fully functioning speed limiter on his vehicle. So in the UK, sometimes you are ordered to put a speed limiter on your car, which means that your car cannot possibly drive above a certain speed. You can press the accelerator, but it just doesn't go faster than, in this case, 40 miles an hour. Okay, so that's a very extreme example. It's a fictional example, but I want this example to help us understand the value of dash cams, okay, and dashcam forensics. So the question that a police officer might be asked is to determine whether there is any evidence to suspect that Sirius Black may have contravened any of these orders or altered the date and time on the dashcam device. In other words, could he have traveled outside this time, but simply just changed the date and time on the dashcam to try and make it look like he never contravened the curfew? Is that possible? That's the question that an investigator might be asked. The investigator might also be asked, has the defendant contravened this order? Is there evidence that he went within a 1.5 mile radius of his ex-wife's workplace? And the evidence that we have, quite simply, is a dashcam device with all the recordings on there. So this is a task that I set my students here in the UK on the MSc Cybersecurity and Management course. They have to work through these kind of examples and kind of solve the case. Obviously, we give them all the training and the knowledge to be able to do it, but this is a typical real-life scenario that they then have to work on to show that they can deal with these kind of problems. So this is what I am now going to talk to you about in the rest of this lecture. I'm going to answer 3 questions. The 3 questions I'm going to answer are, number 1, what is the extent of geospatial data on a dashcam? In other words, what kind of evidence can we actually find on these devices? Question number 2, is it possible to forge this data? Can it be forged? Can the suspect, in the example I've just given you above, can the suspect forge it to make it look like that he didn't travel outside that time? And finally, how do we actually get all the data out of that dash cam? Those are the 3 questions I want to answer. Before I do that, I can see that there's quite a few questions on the chat, so I am now going to just go through them. So Rushil has asked, can these videos be tampered with? Yeah, you've asked, as you said in court, dashcam recordings are admissible. Yes, they are. Can these videos be tampered? And how will it help in that case? I will answer that question, Rushil, as I progress. I'll show you, it's the kind of answer to this question here. Is it possible to forge the data? So the answer to that question will answer your question. Rahul has asked, is the overwriting of previous video, is it a drawback? Yes, it is. The problem you have with a dashcam is this. A dashcam has an SD card in there onto which it stores the video audio footage. If you set the resolution high, for example, 1080p, then you'll maybe only get around 1.5 hours of recording on there before it runs out of space. And the way it then deals with it is it starts overwriting the oldest video. And the idea is that if there's an incident, you know immediately that I need to stop recording on this dashcam because I don't want to lose that incident, yeah? So what you would do is you'd disconnect the dashcam because you want to preserve that incident. So it is a drawback until we get bigger SD cards, and I was talking about 128 gigabyte SD card where you'll get about 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours of recording. As we get bigger SD cards, then we'll be able to store more data on the SD card, and it won't be as much a problem. The next question, Shidi, is what is the difference between dashcam and CCTV camera, and how can it be used to prevent kidnapping and similar crimes? Well, the thing is, a CCTV camera is fixed, a dashcam is mobile. A dashcam stores GPS data. CCTV cameras normally don't. It can't prevent a kidnapping, right? But it will, quite often you get cases where someone has stolen a car, but they don't realize that the dash cam has turned on and it's recording everything. As dash cams get more complex, we will be able to identify the location of a dash cam. So that's all in the future. Okay, before I answer before I go through the rest of the lecture, keep your questions coming. That is really good. It's good to see you're being very interactive. Keep your questions coming. I will keep stopping and answering them. Some I'll try and answer as I go along. I want to begin first by telling you how I did my experiment, i.e. how I gathered my data. Okay, that's where I want to begin. What I did was I have received or have in my possession around 14 different dash cams. There they are. That's my car, or my old car. I've got a new car now. And what I did was I kind of attached each dash cam to my windscreen. At one point, there were 7 dash cams hanging off my windscreen like that. And I just went on normal car journeys, okay? And with each car journey, I turned on certain features. For example, I turned on what I referred to earlier as the park feature. The park feature is a feature where when the dashcam detects any movement, it immediately turns on and starts recording. And the concept behind that is as follows, that if you've parked your car somewhere and you've turned the park feature on, if someone hits your car while it's parked, remember, you're not there, you're at work, you've parked it in your office car park, you've left the park feature on, the dash cam has turned off, someone hits your car, the dash cam immediately turns on and starts recording. When it starts recording, it protects that recording and turns on the read-only attribute. So you won't be able to overwrite that recording because it's a very important recording, okay? So I turned on a feature, did my journey. Next journey, I turned off that same feature, turned on a different feature, did another journey, and I just kept doing that so that I made sure that every feature was turned on and off. And the whole explanation of that process is in my paper. You can have a look there, okay? What you will notice is that in this photo here, I've blanked out the registration plates. And you will also notice in this dash cam here, you can't really see, it's like it's a very foggy day, right? You can't really see the cars, you can't see any registration plates. That is because in the UK, we are not allowed, because I want to distribute the footage that I'm capturing for research purposes. There are maybe 25 universities around the world now that are using my dash cam recordings for research, for teaching their students. Because I want to distribute those recordings, I'm not allowed to capture people's registration plates. So what I did was I blurred all the video footage simply by putting something on the lens that just blurred it a bit, yeah? You'll see more of that in the next slide. So that's how I captured all my data. Then what I did was a series of experiments to see where it was storing all of that evidence and in what format it was storing that evidence. On this next slide here, I'm going to press play and you'll see that you can't actually see much, right? Because it's blurred. But what we see at the bottom here, you can see a watermark. The watermark stores the date, the time, the registration plate. Obviously, I've just made up a registration plate, the speed, the coordinates. We can't forge those easily. Very, very difficult to forge those because they're received from the satellite. We can't forge the speed either. We can forge that. We can simply change the date and time on the dash cam, and then whatever date and time it imprints here is the date and time of the dash cam. However, there are two problems with that. First of all, many dash cams now automatically change that date and time to the satellite date and time. Okay, the satellite date and time doesn't lie. The GPS date and time is always correct. I say that with a tiny bit of caution because although there are suggestions that it can be incorrect, we're just going to assume for the purpose of this lecture that we can trust the date and time of the satellite. So that can be forged, but we can easily detect that. This cannot be forged easily. This is coming directly from the satellite, okay? The satellite is sending that down to the dash cam and it's imprinting it in the watermark. So let's have a look at this video. Okay, let's just see what we see here. There's no sound. The reason there is no sound is because again, for copyright reasons, and because I want to distribute this dashcam footage, I did not want to capture the radio, which has songs which are copyrighted, and effectively I'd actually be distributing copyrighted songs. So for that reason, I captured no audio in any of these Dashcam forensic kind of copies. Okay, so there's nothing much to see other than that you can just see that there's a journey taking place. There's some road signs on the left. There's a truck I'm about to overtake here. There's a speed at the bottom, 111 kilometers an hour, which is fine. This is a motorway. It has a speed limit of 70 miles per hour. I don't know how that translates, but there's no issue there. Okay, so I ended up with 2 dashcam data sets. This is the one. That I'm distributing. If you're doing some research and you need it, then you have to email me, and one of your professors has to confirm that you want access to it, and I'll give it you. It's not a problem. Okay. So let me answer the first question that I promised to answer. The first question is about what kind of evidence can we find on a dashcam. Okay. This table, taken directly from my paper, gives you an example. So I spoke to you about parking mode. Yeah. And if you turn on the parking mode feature, the dashcam then begins a recording under the parking mode feature. Depending on which dashcam we have, we can find evidence in one of 4 different places. One is in the directory structure. What I mean by that is that a recording made in parking mode on the next base 312 will be saved in a special directory. So the existence of that directory tells us that this recording was made in parking mode. In other words, the dashcam sensed a movement and it started to make this recording. It can also be found in the Cobra dashcam in the file attributes, sorry, the file name. The file name will tell us that this particular recording was made in parking mode. Some dashcams, for example, the MyView, have their own software, and that software will also tell us. And finally, the write protection attributes are set on some dashcams. So the next base 312, if a recording is made in parking mode, that recording will have its write attributes turned off, which means you cannot overwrite that recording. You have to go onto a computer system, have admin access to be able to delete that recording. Okay. So what we have here is a kind of the range and prevalence of evidence. The other interesting one is GPS data. GPS data is available in multiple places. The most interesting one for us is the EXIF data. EXIF data is metadata that is embedded within the file. It's embedded in there at the point it is recorded. You are most likely already familiar with this because you take photos. You can go into the photos and look at the properties. The properties store the camera, make and model, the date the photo was taken, and the GPS coordinates that the photo was taken. So that's quite a common feature with cameras. And although we probably didn't realize it, MOV and MP4 files also have that feature. Okay. MP4 files can record EXIF data. And in terms of a dash cam, we can extract the whole journey just from that EXIF data, but we need to know how to do it. And until I wrote the paper, it wasn't quite easy for us to kind of do that. The other location in which we can find GPS data is the one I've just shown you. And that is the watermark there. That also stores the EXIF data. The problem we have is we can't manually extract those coordinates from the watermark because they're changing every 24th of a second. Okay, so for 1 second, there would be 24 kind of GPS coordinates that we need to extract, and you can't do that manually. That's just too much work. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, it's something for you to study in the paper that I've led you to, which explains it in much more detail. How did I extract the data? Well, there's a number of ways in which we can do it. Some dash cams have their own video player as well. So Nextbase, for example, you can go onto their website and you can download their video player. And you can open one of their recordings on their video player and you'll get something like this. You'll get the speed at the bottom. You'll see the video there. And on the right, they'll plot a map of that video. Okay. The problem with this is, number one, it's not acceptable in court. They do not accept this as a valid tool. Number two, this software does not allow me to extract all that data. It just allows me to view it. Okay, so there are problems with that. Then we have another option on the left here. This is a forensic tool. It's called Autopsy. And with this tool, it's designed for forensic investigators. They use this tool to kind of extract deleted files, to kind of do a full analysis of someone's hard disk or their phone, right? But this tool, although it is recognized and it's used in industry, does not give me any metadata whatsoever. It is not able to deal with EXIF data from an MOV or an MP4 file. So I then found that this tool is quite useless. It's not going to help me extract any data. And the way I had to do it was use a tool called EXIF tool, which is a command line tool. And I had to extract all the EXIF data using this tool. The problem with this, well, it's not a problem with the tool. The problem with this approach is you get tens of thousands of GPS records and time records. You can see the speed there. Yeah, you can see the coordinates. You can see the satellite date and time. It gives you all of that. And it actually, it's pages and pages and pages long. There's tens of thousands of records for a single video. So now what we have is, it's not a big data problem, but we do have a problem in that we've got lots and lots and lots of data, which is quite useless because I can't present this data in court because the jury will not understand all this data. What they want to see is something like this. They want to see a map, okay? They want to see speeds. And somehow I have to get from there to there. So what I did, and we're still working on these tools, we're trying to do it more quickly, more cleverly. But at this point in time, we've done it manually, right? Where we've manually extracted all that, converted it into a CSV file, which is in the right format for this tool here. This is called GPXC, I've got it listed at the top there, for this tool to be able to understand. This tool then plots that route for me. It does all the work for me. And it shows me all the speeds as well. And it's showing me, whether or not this dash cam has any evidence of a suspect contravening a speed. So that answers the second question. That's how we've done it. It's not perfect. I have 2 research students at Warwick. I also supervise students at the University of Oxford, and I've got 1 research student at Oxford who are all working on a way of building a much better tool to do this. Okay, because the same tool we are then also going to use with drones to kind of, build one single tool that can deal with drone data and dashcam data as well. And basically any other technology that is able to capture these GPS signals. So let's answer the next question. Can this evidence be forged? Well, let's have a look at the problem. What we have here is how the data looks in autopsy. You can see these directories. You can see the file names. And you can see here that we have a file name here, and that the file name actually has a specific format. It has the year, the month, the date. So if I wanted to forge this, yes, I can forge that. And I did it deliberately here. If you look at the top there, I deliberately changed the date to 2016. Okay, so I did that manually. So here's me as a suspect thinking, I can just change the dates and times, on the file, and nobody will realize. The problem I then have, however, is that date and time has to match what is in the GPS data. So actually, I was wrong. It was this data that I changed, that data that I changed. I changed that month to October. Sorry, let me just recap. It was October, but I changed it to November. So I changed it from 2018-10-06 to 2018-11-06. Just backtrack a bit. The actual date was 2018 October the 7th. That's the actual date this recording was made. And I changed it to 2018 November the 6th. 2018 November the 6th. So there's me thinking, oh, I've changed the date. Nobody will ever know that I was there in October. But like I've said before, the GPS data doesn't lie. It's giving me the actual date the recording was made. So now what we see is an anomaly between the data captured within the EXIF data and the data recorded on the file name itself. So there's clearly there an attempt to obfuscate the dates and times. So the answer to the question about can we forge the date and time is yes, we can, but it's very easily detected if you know how. Can we forge, okay, if we can't forge the date and time, can we forge the coordinates? Okay, well, the problem with forging the coordinates is the following. If we're going to forge these coordinates somehow, we have to go right back to the watermark and somehow forge that as well. And the same applies to the date and time, yeah? And the problem is because the evidence sits in multiple locations on a dash cam, as I showed you on that table a few moments ago, you can't, there's too much to try and forge, number one. And number two, you have to make sure it all tallies up with each other. Let's just have a look at what is involved. If we say, okay, I can forge this, but now I need to go into the EXIF data now, and I need to forge that as well. Let's have a look at what's involved, okay? Number one, I have to do this for 24 records every second. Okay, because this is recording at 24 frames per second. And every frame has one of these records attached. Every frame that my dash cam recorded has one of these frames attached. So that's what I have to do. 24 forgeries for every second of recorded data. Number two, I need to know how to actually go into that EXIF data and make those changes. That is not straightforward. It's quite complex. Let's just assume that we managed to sort that as well, and we've worked out how to do that. Then there's step number three, which is the most complex. Step number three involves me putting in coordinates that actually match a map. Okay, if I do not get those coordinates right, my route will actually be all confused. Okay, so I need to make sure that every single one of these coordinates that I'm forging actually matches. And then finally, step number four, I must make sure that the change in coordinates is consistent with the speed. In other words, if this says 70 kilometers an hour, but the change in coordinates is saying that I've only moved 2 meters, then there's clearly a problem there. So hopefully you can see that it's actually extraordinarily complex trying to forge this data. So we as forensic examiners, we love this kind of evidence because it's so hard to forge. And you know, it's very easy to show in courts. You know, these maps are absolutely brilliant. They're so easy to show in courts. Okay, and the jury understands them. Okay, and now those were the 3 questions I wanted to answer, but I just want to recap on kind of, you know, where my research is going. And I told you I've got research students, 2 at Warwick, 1 at Oxford. Maybe taking on a couple more next year as well to continue working on this and kind of develop it so that next year we can start working on drone forensics. Let's have a look at where this is going. And I've kind of, there's nothing new on this slide. I've already told you all this. There are no tools. I've told you that, you know, we can use third-party tools. I've told you that, you know, there's a lot of data being recorded and that the evidence exists in multiple formats. We're developing a tool that can synthesize all that evidence from those different locations and bring it together. It can produce good timelines, good speed charts that are really useful, contextualized speed charts. What I mean by that is that just because the car or the dash cam evidence is showing that the suspect was traveling at 70 miles an hour, well, that doesn't matter if it was a motorway, right? But if it was a normal high street in the UK, that is a big problem. Yeah, that is probably an imprisonable offence, right? That if they were traveling at 70 miles an hour on a high street. And we want to produce charts like this where, you know, we can use color codes to indicate speeds. This is actually a professionally produced chart. And I know it's showing that the car's gone off the road, but it's just me going off on a tiny bit of a tangent here. GPS coordinate, this was soon after the dash cam was turned on. It takes a little while for the GPS coordinates to kind of become firm. And even after that, it does lose them sometimes, for instance, when you go through tunnels or built areas. So, you know, GPS coordinates are good, but they're not 100% reliable. But when you bring something like this together, you know, a huge map of the entire journey, And then you can back it up with video data as well to say, well, that's what the map is saying. The map is saying you were at this location. The video is also showing me that you were at this location. You know, we can kind of synthesize things quite easily that way. Okay, so that is actually everything I wanted to cover, and I've just about got it in time, but I will give a few minutes for questions. So I'm quite conscious I went over a bit. Rahul has asked a question. With this, so I'm going to first go to the chat, and then I'll see if anyone wants to ask them on using their microphone. So Rahul, you've asked, with this many frames per second, we will be able to see a bullet killing a person, but not the direction of the bullet fired. Yes, maybe, but I don't know if the quality of the dash cam in some cases is good enough to capture that. So what I mean by that is that we are only now seeing HD dash cams. Yeah, there's one there. We're not quite seeing 4K dash cams, and you need a good resolution to spot something like that. Amarjit has asked, even if someone goes through this complexity to change data, but video is there to verify coordinate and speed of car, can that also needs to be, yes, the watermark would also need to be manipulated if you really want to forge the evidence. It's really goes to a point where for a suspect, it's just not worth trying. You're better off trying to destroy the dash cam than trying to forge the data. Sarbjot has asked, why is this tool admissible in court while the previous tool from the camera manufacturer is not? Okay, so what we have here is this is the tool that Nextbase have developed, and the UK courts, the way they work is that for a tool to be acceptable, it has to be peer reviewed. And there are certain tests that it has to pass before a court will start accepting that tool as an acceptable forensic tool. Okay, so what I meant was that although this tool probably works perfectly, it's not acceptable as a forensic tool. A forensic tool has to, all the errors associated with that tool have to be public. It has to be peer reviewed. There are rules about how it can be updated, how often it is updated, and so on and so forth. And this is not designed to be a forensic tool. So Nextbase have not gone to the trouble of kind of trying to put this through as a forensic tool. However, with tools like Autopsy, NCASE, FTK, they are used by law enforcement authorities around the world, and they have been through those tests, and courts accept them worldwide. We know, for example, that with Autopsy version, the one that I just finished teaching 2 weeks ago was 14.1, I think it was 14.14. I know what the errors are because they still have errors, but we know what those errors are. And we understand them, and we know how to get around those errors to make sure that what we're actually presenting is true. They've been used in courts for many years, decades now, in fact, at least 1.5 decades rather. So we do trust those tools. Vipul has asked, what is the resolution of the video? How much of video can be stored in, say, 1 GB of card? Well, first of all, a lot of dash cams don't even accept 1 GB cards yet. Some of the dash cams, they have a limit. So the Nextbase, I think this one has a limit of 128 GB. I can't remember the limits on these, but I don't know of a dash cam yet that accepts a 1 gig card. In terms of how much video you can store, I suspect if you were recording at 1080, you would get around 8 hours of recording on you'd get more actually. You'd probably get 10 hours of recording on a 1 GB card. So if you were traveling from Delhi to the Punjab, you would you'd easily get the full journey. If a journey is important, so this has become a bit of a fashion in the USA, east to west, Route 66, all these journeys that people like doing. if it's important, what you would do is you'd probably take about 10 dashcam cards with you. And at the end of each day, just keep backing up onto a hard drive if that route is important. Rahul has asked, how do you balance the ultra-wide view feature versus the focus feature? Okay, so some of these, this one, for example, the 312 is a wide angle lens. So you get a good landscape photo, a video. This one is not wide, it kind of doesn't have a wide. And in fact, the latest one I've got, because I was actually sent a box of dash cams by Nextbase. So because they knew I was doing this research, they sent me a box of dash cams, right? They're brand new generation dash cams, and it was wonderful because the university didn't have to pay for them, and I can now research those. They've got a 180 degree, not 360, 180 degree lens, which kind of captures a much wider angle kind of footage. So in terms of how you balance that, well, I'm not sure how you kind of balance that, but that is where the technology is going. I'm going to finish with that, guys and girls. I just want to say, well, thank you. I hope, Sabudh, that is okay, and that it's 10 o'clock and I've got another meeting in exactly 10 minutes. So if you don't mind, I will finish there. But what I want to do is this. I want to thank you all for listening. I do enjoy doing these lectures. I do actually, under normal times, I do visit India twice a year. I go through, Warwick sent me normally about May and sometimes in November, sometimes in February. So when I'm next there, which will probably be end of the year if flights open, or maybe next year, I'd love to come and do a face-to-face lecture with you guys. But I do enjoy doing this. I've done maybe 70 to 80 lectures around India at universities and colleges. I absolutely adore doing that. So I'm really honored that you've given me a chance to do this. I have given you my email address there. I actually really don't mind you emailing me if you have questions about my research. I would encourage you to think about, things like drone forensics or dashcam forensics as a research project, because these are cutting edge kind of topic areas. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harjinder.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we will hold you to that offer and have you come and speak to them in person. We have actually expanded our size because we are not limited to a physical space. And so we don't have everybody in one physical space, but we definitely have a lot of connections with a number of universities and colleges in Punjab and the northern region. So we would love for you to come and interact with the students and talk more. I loved hearing about the webcams because it was a data source I had not heard of. And it just seems like there are lots of interesting AI applications also to even figure out how you, can maybe decide what video footage could be capturing something that needs to be saved, right? And be intelligent about saving video footage. And I think those are really
absolutely. I mean, there's other AI applications. I mean, for example, the road signs, right? Capturing all that data and using that data to enrich what we know about this journey. But there's also so you saw in my videos that they're blurred. Mm-hmm. So there's one researcher, I think he was in Italy, saying that he's interested in it from a kind of visually impaired kind of data set that contains a lot of data that could represent what visually impaired people see. And
right,
so
interesting.
There's a lot of research opportunities. You start off with one area, and suddenly it goes into all these different areas that you could kind of go into.
Yeah, I won't keep you because I know you have another call. I mean, there were all sorts of kind of things about privacy that I was, wanting to ask you about as well. And I think you said that you put some kind of a filter to blur out what is being recorded, but typically the recordings would be of high quality, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Typically, I think maybe for my the problem I have is I don't want to share a real recording that I've made, sure, because you don't know if someone's recording it at the other end and then they'll put it on YouTube, and so you always have to be careful, but they're always very high quality. So me and my family went to Cornwall last year, and after we came briefly out of lockdown, and this was just about 2 days after Next Base had sent me literally 2 or 3 boxes of dash cams, right? So what I did was I connected the best one up in my car. We had the cabin view of the family, we had the rear view, we had the front view, and I thought I'm just going to record it as a family trip, and it was absolutely wonderful. I mean, 10 years from now, when my children are growing up, we'll go back and say, do you remember we had that Cornwall trip? And there's all that gossiping in the car and all that, arguing with the children between themselves and talking about this and talking. It was absolutely wonderful. And the quality was absolutely perfect. It was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, and I think ordinarily brilliant.
Yeah, and what you brought up about drones as well. Actually, one of the things that we are using drones for is agriculture, and using drones for kind of figuring out disease and so on. And I think there are kind of interesting aspects there where we're looking at all that data as being a way of creating a lot of transparency within the whole agriculture process, and even using that in some ways to get people living abroad, right, investing in their uncle's farming outcomes or whatever, right?
Well, and so there is that, but there's also kind of detecting problems in the agricultural.
That we are doing for sure. That's our primary focus. But what we were also thinking was that currently there's a big problem with farmers getting into debt because they're taking all the risk. And so if we can open up their produce, right, the futures of their produce as something that people can invest in who are living abroad, if we could use this kind of forensics to ensure that the data is not tampered with, I think that could become a very important aspect, right, for people to actually trust the data that's coming up. So I think there's an opportunity there, and I'd love to talk to you at more length then, but I know you've got to go, so I won't keep you for now.
I'm really keen on exploring these opportunities. So if we can maybe connect at some point and look at that would be absolutely superb.
Definitely.
So I'm helping, obviously, helping India as well, and kind of, using all this knowledge I have to try and help, back home as well. So thank you.
And just very, very quickly again, we're actually doing a project on understanding the impact of Rag Kirtan on the brain by using ECG skull caps and stuff. So that's another area I'm sure you'll be very keen on. So we'll talk later. All right. So take care, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. Take care. Bye.
All right. Bye.